this charm ain't a thing. But as the wind changed direction and the tempo died to fire, the crowd got a will.
Are you tired?
No.
Shall we do this for 4 days next time? Yes! Be careful what you ask for, you might get it. We did Florida twice. Anybody for San Diego next time? Las Vegas? New York? Hawaii? By show of hands, I'm interested to hear how many people would like to see more business tracks. All right, that's very telling. That's good. How many people would like to see more focus on the technology, on the infrastructure, or the environment? Or okay. So you'll have a chance to ask us questions, but before that, I get to ask you a few questions. So let's start with what's the single thing you liked about the conference? It will take 4 or 5 responses. The single thing you liked about the conference. All right, Sean Walker. What else?
Was that Sean?
Brother.
Enthusiasm, great. People. Passion, great. Networking. Leadership improvement. Education. The person who said Sean Walker, you can take him home, seriously. So I want to share with you my observations of the conference, and then we'll open it up for questions at your end. So the things that I noticed about the conference that I really liked was, one, the passion and the excitement. I think it was phenomenal to see how committed people are to the product, how committed people are to each other, to the ecosystem. That was just phenomenal to see. We were meeting with the Department of Defense upstairs earlier in the day, and one of the members of the team there said, I've been to the Apple Developer Conference, and by no means are you guys that size, but it's interesting that you guys have the same kind of vibe. So I was very pleased to hear that. I think that's a great compliment to all of you. The second thing that I really noticed, just interacting with different people at the conference, is there's a lot of good people here. People seem to want to help each other. People get along with each other. People like each other. They like having fun with each other. They like working with each other. It's just phenomenal to watch. And even in instances where you have one system integrator talking to another system integrator, or a hoster talking to a hoster, there is still that camaraderie. And I think that's hard to replicate. That speaks a lot to the culture that this ecosystem has. And I think that it has that because of all of you. So thank you. The third one is, I think it was pretty apparent last night, people in this ecosystem love to have fun. So there's a third thing I thought that was great. So what I want to do next is I want to open it up for questions from you. So here's the thing. You learned a lot about the conference. You said education. You've heard a lot of announcements. You've seen the product. You've watched a lot of sessions. You can ask us any questions you want in terms of any announcements you've heard about the conference itself, about what you would like to see better in the conference, or anything for that matter. Everything is game. But before we go there, I've got one last question. How many people in the audience have spent more than 9 years with .NET Nuke? It's fantastic. So I think yesterday I mentioned, at the end of my keynote, I said, Sean spent a decade at .NET Nuke. And the thing I did not know at the time, that there were other people who joined, and within 2 months, I thought they hadn't spent a decade yet. In fact, I sent an email to Sean last night, and he told me that there were multiple people who were close to a decade with .NET Nuke. So I want to take a moment to thank Sean Walker, Scott Wilhite, Joe Brinkman, Nick Kalyani, who is sitting right here up front. The reason I say that is, it takes a lot of effort to build a company. And I think Joe's last presentation said it extremely well in 5 minutes. Thankfully, I'm not on a timer. I couldn't do it as well as he did. But my point is this. There are a lot of ups and downs. A lot of times, it creates self-doubt, whether you even want to proceed any further. He talked about hitting payroll. It's not just about payroll, though. Payroll is one part of it. But it's also an emotional thing. You've got to remember, 10 years is a long time in anybody's life. 10 years, they say, is a career in terms of a lifetime, right? I mean, in the sense, it's a lifetime. It's pretty much a lifetime. It defines your life. You're talking about a 30, 40-year career. 10 years is a long time. And these people have dedicated that time to .NET Nuke, not only in terms of working hard, but also making sure it's successful, never giving up, persevering in the face of great odds. And I think they deserve a standing ovation. Can we all stand up? All right, now you can ask us questions.
Okay, we're done.
Still not quite into using 7 yet. We're still not out of 6, but what do you think about looking forward? Are we going to stay in 7 longer than we stayed in 6 this time? This is the shortest between big number changes. They're exciting, just curious about what you think 2 years down the line. What's up next?
So from a product perspective, in the past, and I did write a blog about this, but we had a philosophy that every time Microsoft came out with a major version increment, that we would come out with a major version increment of our own. So in that respect, I'm not sure when the next version increment of Microsoft technology is going to be. If it's in 2 years or it's in 3 years, then maybe that might be the appropriate time. Or we could change the whole model. The reason why we only ended up having a couple of 6.x releases is because we also lengthened the release cycles. If you go back to the 5.x cycles, we were cranking out releases every 3 months. And now we've been on more of a 6-month cadence. So as a result, we had fewer releases, but with more features in them and higher quality. So,
and I would just add one thing to that, and I alluded to it in my talk, is that there's a big difference between where we were in the past as an engineering organization, as a product organization. You're seeing in the last 18 months, we have had as much innovation and development in the platform as we had in the previous 3 or 4 years. And I think that speaks volumes to where we're at as an organization. They're not just number changes just to have a number change. They're number changes because we're doing such dramatic improvement in the product at this point that it warrants that number change.
And just from an engineering standpoint, I mean, I leave Sean and product management to determine the version numbers. But for me, we need to push the envelope and we need to actually push faster. There's a big change in types of devices, the way people interact, the way they use different devices. And if we're not there with the infrastructure, with the pieces underneath that we engineer, we miss out. We all lose. And so we need to execute fast.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, I want to thank you guys for putting the conference together, and it's great to see DNN Corp investing in the community again. My question is as follows. I know you guys are all firmly behind CE and that you believe that there is a connection between CE and PE. Do you, from your experience in the boardroom, is this still in 2012 shared in the boardroom as well, this idea that CE ultimately is something that contributes to your bottom line, PE, etc.?
So I'll take that question. So just so I understand it right, your question is, will the company continue to focus on the community edition in the future as well? Put it very simply, am I right?
Yeah, it was a loaded question, but yeah, that's behind.
Absolutely. I think we never lose sight of the fact that our company, the commercial editions are built on a foundation. There is nothing we will do in terms of affecting the foundation in any way negative whatsoever. That's one. Second, on the contrary, we'll continue to strengthen it more and more as we go forward. I can see where the question is coming from, because I think in the last conference, we had pictures of the yin and the yang. I think Sean's presentation covered it, my presentation covered it. We did not cover it this time. So I can see where the question comes from. But I think one of the reasons we didn't cover it this time was because our actions have spoken way louder than words ever can. If you look at how much we have done in the last 18 or 24 months with respect to see whether it was with 6.0 or 6.1, we have put in a lot of effort, or even 6.2 for that matter. We have put in a lot of effort into strengthening the core framework itself. So given that we didn't feel the need to put up a slide and go over it, but to reiterate my point, community edition was the foundation, is the foundation, and will be the foundation of our success. We are very, very cognizant of that.
I'm Jan Jørding from Norway. About the nebula, we don't know too much about it. We will, I guess. But what effects do you think that the .NET Nuke Corp production of turnkey solutions will have to the ecosystem around .NET Nuke?
So I'll answer that, and maybe one of my colleagues can probably better the answer. So I think the word solution, you can look at it different ways. When we're talking about a solution, we're talking about a full application by itself. And you will see this much more clearly when Nebula is actually launched. It's a very comprehensive solution that takes a lot of effort, that takes a lot of graphic designers, engineers, product management working together to build it. So if you look at the ecosystem, yes, there are modules. Some of the modules are complex. They do a lot of stuff. But we are not intent on competing with that market. We've maintained all along that we will not compete with our ecosystem. Till date, I have had a lot of people today, even before, suggest to me, you've got a lot of these modules in P, why don't you also sell them piecemeal? The reason we don't do that is we don't want to compete with the ecosystem. We've got our lines clearly drawn. When we talk about the yin and the yang that I just mentioned, we are very serious about it. So the solution we're thinking about with Nebula is very comprehensive, it's very deep, and it's a solution that will be priced at a very high level. I mean, I don't know what the price is going to be. When I say very high, we're not talking about the proprietary software kind of high. I'm talking about much higher than any module or skin that you find in our store. So to that extent, it still means that we're looking at a different kind of market. So in that sense, it will still be separate from what we do. So it is distinct from a product perspective. It is distinct from a target market perspective. So in that sense, we will not compete with the ecosystem. So to answer your question very directly, we expect no impact whatsoever with the ecosystem with the launch of a solution.
And I guess I would mention that, so definitely no negative impact to the ecosystem. I think that there is some potential for positive impact on the ecosystem. I think that we have a lot of great components today, and a lot of folks that are here are system integrators, people who are doing implementations for customers that are actually doing your own implementations. And I think that there is still too much work that's done today to put all those pieces together in a manner that's optimized for your environment. And so rather than spending that effort on that kind of menial work, you should be spending effort on the value adds instead. And so by putting together a complete solution to tackle a problem, we'll take that work out of the way so that you can focus on higher value work. And at the same time, I think that we can start to cater to markets that maybe are not looking at us today. For example, with social, there are companies out there that are looking for a social solution, and they're not going to find .NET Nuke today because we're not marketing ourselves to that audience. As soon as we have a social solution, it opens up a whole new opportunity, not just for us, but for all of you as well. So those are two positive I see that could happen as a result of solutions.
Hi, I'm Stephen Webster, F5 Networks. We're excited to see all the investments that you guys have been making in the platform, the kind of continued maturity of the company, the product, and the community. We're always trying to figure out how to plan our investments and our schedules around .NET Nuke. So one of the things I wanted to ask was, what specific plans do you have to begin to maybe make a, I guess in that theme of maturity, more investment in documentation, pre-release, specifically developer-focused documentation, as well as, and I think this is the big one for us, when do you think you might be able to publish a proper roadmap that's forward-looking so we can begin to align our development investments with yours?
I'll take the documentation one. You know, basically, what I'd love to do is get more feedback from everybody on the caliber of the documentation that's there. And if you want, you can email me directly, bob.kruger@dnncorp.com. I mean, I'd love to get that and also understand what you're looking for in the docs, how you find the wiki, if there's some other mechanisms that you might find more viable, then, you know, that's something that we're interested in. So it's a good time to be having that discussion.
Quick show of hands, how many people here actually know that we have a wiki and have actually been to it and seen it? Okay.
Good, quite a few. Yeah, so I don't know if the question was more about end user documentation or developer documentation.
Yeah, I took it as developer doc.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so as far as we've heard the feedback, I've heard it from a number of people at this event about developer documentation. Sometimes being a little out of date, sometimes coming too far after the release, and really being sort of spread out across the ecosystem, not consolidated in a place in an authoritative manner that you can go to one place and find the answers you're looking for. I definitely think that we have some work to do there. As far as the roadmap is concerned, we are pretty transparent in terms of sharing, you know, the different products that we're pursuing, the different, I guess, services we're looking to introduce. I guess, like for example, for the next major release, I guess we haven't published anything definitive about what might be coming in 7.1. And so we do need to get a bit better at getting out in front of that. But I would expect information about 7.1 to be shared fairly shortly. And so, I mean, I guess that's all I can really add about roadmap.
Yeah, just adding one thing back on the documentation. Again, as I said, I'm very interested in what you want for developers, but I think everybody should be aware that we made some major changes recently on the user doc side. So if you notice, every release we do, the docs come out same day as the code. And from an infrastructure standpoint, it's entirely revamped. Everything's very searchable. You can do deep nested searches now. We've got video that'll be hooked up to it for 7.0. So we've worked on that side. And intuitively, I think there are improvements needed, but I haven't gotten enough feedback from people as to what you all would like. So for me, that's important.
We're all done, tapped out.
Last night was tougher than we thought.
I've got several pieces from different people regarding the situation of .NET Nuke in Europe. What are your plans regarding marketing, regarding growing the market for .NET Nuke in Europe? If there is any, of course.
So there's absolutely plans for growing Europe. That's the region I guess we have made an investment there. I think for the first time we have an office there in Amsterdam with 4 employees there. So in that sense, we are definitely vested in Europe. If your question is more specifically related to when we will put more marketing dollars behind it, that's a tough one to answer right now in a public setting because it really depends on when we do the business planning for the company towards the end of the year. one thing you can be rest assured is we are committed to Europe. I cannot sit here and I cannot tell you what date we will have a conference in Europe, for example. I don't know. Will it be a long time from now? No. Will it be more than 2 years from now? No. Will it be next year? I don't know. For example, if you talk about a conference like this in Europe. So it's a tough question for me to answer in a public setting like this. All I can tell you in this setting is we are very committed to Europe, and we will make sure we are successful in Europe. What timeline it is and how we're going to do it is a tough one to answer for me right now.
One thing we can say without hesitation is the caliber of individuals that we've added to our European operation is just absolutely top-notch. And as I look at it from the perspective of the organizations that are now signing on, generating revenue for the organization, and the prospect list for companies that are about to come on, it is extremely encouraging. So I would, without announcing anything, I would optimistically state that there is going to be investment in Europe, and I'm very hopeful to say that it will be sooner than later.
And as VChance knows, we certainly are investing in the infrastructure to make sure that the product works in Europe. Right?
And I think you see, even with some of the initiatives like the cloud initiative, that we continue to make investments in ensuring that the product works across language barriers, across localization, or across locales, and across cultures. And that's an ongoing commitment that we have. And you saw that both from the localization and translations of all the products this last year, and in the new stuff that we're working on now.
Yeah, and the trials themselves are already done.
Yeah.
So I'll just close with an analogy. So if you're looking at a business as a crawl, walk, run, fly, stay 4 stages, I think in the US we're in the running stage. And in Europe we're more in the walking stage. The focus for us is to get Europe from walking to running, and North America to get from running to flying. So that's how we look at it.
I'll tell you one place where we're not walking in Europe is with our partner network, because while we have an incredible partner network here in North America, I would say that our top partners are performing as well, if not better, in Europe than anywhere else in the world. We couldn't be prouder or more pleased with the performance of our European partners, and that foundation is going to represent a very strong foothold to build upon.
Marketing-wise, I was curious if DNN Core sees themselves stepping up and letting the rest of the world know how great this product is.
I'm supposed to answer that?
Say yes.
Yes. I recognize that our marketing has not been the best. It's not been the best this year. It's not been the best last year. It's not been the best 2 years ago. And I recognize, especially people in the ecosystem believe we have such an awesome product. Why doesn't DNN Corp do a better job of telling a good story? So I'm very cognizant of that. We are taking some steps, and I want to check back with you again in 12 months. I seriously do, because you will see a ton of changes in the way we tell our story. It is one of the 4 things I have on my board in my office that I look at every day. What you just said is one of the 4 things I have in my office every day. I mean, I look at it every day. So it is a serious priority for us, and we will change the way we tell our story.
What are the other 3?
Stepped into that one.
Yeah, I can do the other 3. The first, of course, is revenue growth. I look at the numbers. I mean, I've got my main man sitting here right next to me, so I look at his face every morning. So so revenue growth is a key component of it. That's the first one.
He actually comes into my office. He doesn't look at it from his office.
The other 2 are for the next 12 to 18 months are cloud and social. We're very serious about those 2 things.
So I want to, first of all, just thank you for the time and effort you put into the product. I think it shows, especially in the later Releases. One of the slides said you have to, not every baby is cute. what would you guys say is the part of .NET Nuke that probably still needs the most work, and what's being done to address that?
So I'll talk a little bit about that, because there is one thing, and we had a meeting with a partner yesterday, and we talked about a lot of stuff. And one of the things that they were surprised about was how much we talk internally and look at internal-facing things we could improve. And one of the things that I think has come up repeatedly in our discussions lately, as it relates to the cloud, as it relates to Nebula and some of the new initiatives we have, is we still have this challenge, and we started to address some of it in 7.0, around onboarding new users, around getting that new user experience right, so that when you come into .NET Nuke, that people intuitively know how to use it, how to get started, what's the next step. It's a very complex product, and we sometimes put all of that complexity right in front of people and just sort of right in their face, and that may not be the best way to help our customers and our users get started, and it's something we're really focused on trying to resolve sooner rather than later. And to me, that one's top of mind just because we've had so many conversations about it lately, and in the full light of day, you know, we do have these things that we talk about and that we know need to be improved. So for me, that's one of them.
I agree. I think simplicity in general, whether it's the onboarding, creation of modules, licensing, access and interaction with .NET Nuke itself. You know, when you come to DNN.com, why not automatically, if you're given an account, have access to the store, or vice versa? And just, you know, have everything more tightly integrated and just simpler. And I don't think that we have to compromise power just because of that. We can still have all that great capability.
Yeah, I think improving similar to what Joe said, is also improving the developer experience. We have a ton of flexibility in the platform, which means that you have many different ways to accomplish the same goal, which is a good thing, but it's also really daunting when you're brand new to the platform because you don't know which path to take to begin with. And there clearly is different paths that different levels of developers should take, and then they should graduate onto various other levels. And so we don't provide great guidance for that today, and I think that we have some work to do there. And that would help us immensely in terms of attracting new developer talent to our platform if we could tackle that problem.
You mentioned the store. What are some of the new features that are coming in the store in the next few months?
I'm glad you asked about that.
Not a ringer.
So I don't know if everybody heard, Jonathan was asking about the store and some of the things that we're doing. Well, first off, we just recently made some major improvements to search, and many of you probably haven't discovered that yet. We've also done a lot of work to refine the products and listings that are there and make things more relevant. We've removed a lot of dead listings or things that are just garbage. We also will be redoing the products listings page, and so that'll be a lot easier to review, be much more professional and consistent, not just within itself, but it'll be similar to other really well-done public sites that you might have used. There's some things that we're going to do in terms of package verification. Sean mentioned that in his keynote, and I don't want to get too far ahead in terms of that, but we're a long ways away down the road on the code, and so we'll be starting soon on the process itself, and that should have a lot of benefits for people. We'll be creating a demo area, so we'll make it much easier for people to trial the software from the store. So those are some of the big highlights. We've got a few more things up our sleeve, but again, I don't want to tip our hand just yet till we've got some firm dates and know we can deliver and when. Okay.
I'm not sure really who should answer this question, but regarding the store and the modules that are sold in there, I've got a couple of clients really upset by module vendors completely disappearing off the scene, stopping answering emails. So how do you think we can solve this issue? In the last couple of weeks, I've been finding a module vendor in and out, in all the internet, in all the forums, everywhere, no answer so far. The client has been chasing me for finding him. How do you think is the best way for us to solve this thing? Because it's starting to be a big problem when someone invests in one module and creates a website using a module as a core feature, and the module vendor completely disappears, even if you first thought that it was a serious module vendor. So is there any way that DNN can help integrators around this problem?
Yes, there's a few things. First off, we're actually spending more time to review all those things. We have, actually, the team itself looks at all the dialogues between our customers and the vendors, and when we see that things aren't being responded to, particularly when we're notified, then we do get in the middle and we contact the vendors, and we have taken a number of steps. In fact, even earlier this week, we had delisted someone, and because of that, they were pulled, and it was all because they weren't responding to emails, let alone providing support. And we're going to be doing that much more often because it's a reputation that we have, and we need to make sure that people feel safe and they're going to get their money's worth from working with the store. In addition, we'll be doing much more with ratings. So we'll be notifying people who have purchased something and look for a review within, I think it was 21 days, something like that. And so we'll be posting those. In fact, the reviews will be much more pervasive in the revised products description page. So people will be able to see that. We'll be doing a lot more with badging and reputation, which should also help. And so vendors, if they want to stay in the store, they're going to have to really make sure that they have good products and have good service. Otherwise, they run the risk of being delisted. So those are the ideas that we have, and if anybody has anything else, happy to hear those, and you can submit those to us directly. Again, if you contact the store, actually we can look into that, and we're happy to do so. It's hard to get every one of them. I think every store vendor has that problem, right? Not just .NET New, but definitely we want to do the right thing, and we want to make sure that people have a good experience. And we also want to make sure that the vendors who are legitimate, who do provide great service, that they're appropriately recognized.
Let's go one more and then you.
A question that I had.
Where it's coming from.
Question who had? A question that I had, we see a lot of different, this is a store question as well. We see a lot of different vendors who are rolling their own licensing schemes for their different modules. Some people have trials, some people don't. Some people are licensed per installation, some are per portal, some are per user. There's about 70 different licensing options. Are there any plans for .NET Nuke to have like a .NET Nuke .licensing API or something like that that we as vendors can tie into so that everybody's doing things the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that we've talked about for some time, and it's become more of a priority because of the reason that you just identified. So it is definitely something that we're going to be looking at.
In the past, we had something that we used to call the core modules, and they still have a forum in the website. But at some stage, Corp decided that they should become module just like any other module in Codeplex. My feeling is that the customers don't really understand if core modules still have a special status or not, and if so, what that status is. So my question is that, what are you going to do with what used to be the core modules? And second question, whatever the answer, shouldn't we communicate more accurately about this?
Yeah, so we did make the decision in .NET Nuke 6 to remove the so-called core modules. There were some reasons why we decided to do that. One, because when we were shipping them as part of the overall product, people got the impression that they were fully maintained and supported by .NET Nuke Corp, which in fact they are not. They are maintained and supported by individual volunteers. that work on each of those different modules, and they are all in different stages in terms of whether they're being actively developed, not developed at all, whether bugs are being fixed in them. And so because of that, we thought that they would be better off treated the same way that any other open source license Forge module is treated. Basically, they put in the Forge, and then people can choose to install them into their website just like any other Forge module. And they can be installed using the integration between the Forge and the software the same way as any other Forge module. But you're right, it did create this confusion in that when we took them out, people thought that we basically removed some functionality from the application. And we probably didn't do a good enough job of communicating all the reasons why we removed them. Going forward, we still have some cleanup to do around that. We are, in fact, going to be including a few more modules as part of the Professional Edition product to create, I guess, more value for commercial customers so that they, and for the ones that we are going to include with the Commercial Edition, we are going to take on the responsibility of maintaining and supporting those officially, which we can't do for the Community Edition product. And so that is one of the changes that is going to happen in .NET Nuke 7. And then better communication, I guess, with the people who are responsible for those core modules, and also cleaning up the website as well so that it doesn't appear that they are fully supported.
Yes, quickly, the definition of a core module, I mean, if anybody doesn't really quite understand that, is really, they're really just modules for which we own the copyright. But core modules have actually been being developed independently, usually by volunteers, since about 2005. Yeah. In some cases, we had internal resources that continued to work on some of those. For example, Chris Patera continued to maintain the forum module for a very long time, but he really did that just kind of out of the goodness of his own heart. You know, it's just a project that he had when he came on board to work for us and continued to do. So there's just an issue with that whole idea of core module as a nomenclature that really I'd love for us to be able to get past. The other thing is that, you know, we would get stuck because since they really don't have more meaning, as in being part of the product, the reality is that there's some really cool modules in the Forge that we don't have anything to do with. And what we'd really like to do is make it more visible for people to know that there are options, that there are things available to them that they can get, you know, and allow the cream to rise to the top. And sometimes that's going to be modules that we own the IP for, or the copyright for technically. Other times it's going to be ones that other individuals do. And also, I'm actually talking to a couple of different organizations, and we'll be talking to several more about kind of sponsoring ongoing development of some key things so that they are available. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Benoit. And Benoit, by the way, the guy who just asked the question, responsible for the store module, in case any of you guys don't know, just a little bit of work going on in that product. So thank you, Benoit. But it is a communications issue. It is one we need to solve and just help people understand how things work.
I just wanted to thank you guys, obviously, for the conference. It's been great, and a lot of information has been provided. But to kind of backtrack a little bit on the store, you said you were going to start badging and kind of like rating certain vendor modules and stuff in the store. What type of approach are you guys thinking as far as it going to be based on you guys or customers or people that have purchased? Because obviously that opens up several different cans of worms. You know, customers could be like, oh, completely dissatisfied, even though the developer may have taken those steps to satisfy them, and they get the bad rating, and so then everyone sees it. So I was just kind of curious if you had anything you could share about that.
Sure, we still need to put the actual program together, but when we talk about ratings, those would be customer ratings, the buyers, not us. And then you would expect people would talk about the nature of the product, the support they've gotten from the customer, anything of that nature. The reference to badging has to do with compatibility. So for example, we want modules to be SQL Azure compatible. And so we'll have, through our verification program, a way to look at that and let people know. So those sorts of things.
I have a question about back to the core modules actually. There are a number of modules. I mean, it's a mixed bag, of course, in terms of the quality that we have with the core modules, and I'm acutely aware of this, and I'm obviously in part also to blame for some of that stuff. But my question is this. I mean, this is actually a discussion that's been playing out among several players in this area. That some, all modules are equal, but some are just more equal than others, if you like. It seems that a community edition would really benefit from having a couple of strong modules that support a typical scenario in which they would be deployed. So in other words, a hobby or a little club site, someone who is not really a potential customer for a PE site. However, that would drive the product going forward and saying, okay, well, this is an awesome CMS, I just roll it out, and I have, a forum is one obvious example. It's always been a prime focus. But blog, of course, is another, and if, most of you who know me know that I'm probably referring to the blog module currently, which is in dire need of a bit of work. And in fact, it's quite a lot of work. And I noticed that behind the scenes that it is very, very difficult to get people to collaborate and move forward on one of these modules. And my question is this. Would the DNN Corp consider, having observed, let's say, a couple of years, that a particular module perceived to be important for CE is just not moving forward, and there's no one stepping into that space on Codeplex or whatever, would DNN Corp consider stepping into the space themselves?
Scott, I think that's a good bounty question, right? Because we had discussed bounties before.
I didn't think that's the question that Peter was asking.
Okay. So I'll try to answer, I guess, from the perspective that I thought you were asking from. So if there is sort of key community-oriented modules that volunteers are working on and they're not making progress and they become important to the future in terms of making sure that the community edition is a competitive product with other open source CMSs. Then we have talked internally about taking measures to perhaps help the team that's responsible for that open source module to make more progress. For example, paying a developer a bounty to focus some effort and some time on improving the module in a particular way that we would like it to evolve. Those would be on a sort of one-off basis, though, as the situation comes up. So it definitely has been discussed internally. We've never actually taken action yet to do that. And it's obviously a lot more complex than that because we have to weigh those decisions against, sort of the roadmap, what we're developing for the commercial product. Many different factors have to play into that, but it's definitely not ruled out.
Right, yeah, I actually will expand on that just a little bit. Thanks, Sean. So you heard me mention a moment ago something about sponsoring. Traditionally, all of these projects have been owned by individuals. I think any of you who have participated in the community for a while know that obviously organizations are involved and do things with .NET Nuke, but in terms of membership and in terms of persona on the site and whatnot, it's always been about the individual. And that's been true about projects as well. We actually are actively looking right now really more deeply at this idea of having a sponsoring organization around an individual project. So I'm sure that there are plenty of development companies, small development companies, even represented in this room, who are active users of the blog or active users of the forum or active users of any number of these other projects. And what I'd like to do, I've initiated some one-on-one conversations already, but I'll just make an open invitation if there's a particular organization here that has some interest in becoming a sponsoring organization around one of those projects to talk to me. We want to see these flourish for the same reasons that you want to see them flourish. And we recognize that it kind of takes a little stepping up to the plate to say, okay, we're willing to throw down and not only make improvements for ourselves, but expose ourselves to, open ourselves to the kind of criticism that we can get sometimes when you start giving your products away and allowing other people to use them. But we're happy to talk you through that process and work with you on what it would mean to be a sponsoring organization who'd be willing to contribute in that way back to the community. It can be really rewarding, it can be really challenging. It's a way of deepening your relationship with DNN. But that is one way that we're looking to sort of deal with that here.
So just to back up what Sean and Scott said, I will back anything that is a joint exercise. The thing that I want everybody to understand is we already put a lot of resources into the framework itself. We absolutely do. If you look at my engineering resources over the last 2 years, more time has been spent on building the foundation than has been on the commercial edition. Absolutely. 100% for the last 2 years. So I like ideas like this, but they have to be a joint exercise. It has to be something where somebody says, okay, I'm willing to do this, how can CARP help? And if it means sponsorship, I'm okay with that as well. But there has to be a collaborative exercise of moving the whole thing forward. It cannot be a case of, CARP, you're doing a lot of these things, that's great, can you do this one additional thing? That doesn't work. Given the time, we'll say last 3 questions. Is that okay? Okay.
Could I turn the question a little bit to the support area?
Sure.
And I perfectly understand the notion that if I have a professional license, for example, and I've loaded up my site with third-party modules and I run into trouble, I'll first turn to you. And the question is, how do you approach the support issue, potentially it's a third-party module issue, without saying, not our fault, talk to the vendor?
Well,
and particularly in those cases where it might not be clear if it's the third-party module or not.
You know what I would suggest? Just hand the mic to the person behind.
Yeah, so I think in terms of, we do our best effort to diagnose the problem as far as we can realistically before we would ever come back to you and say, well, the problem is a third-party module. So we're going to diagnose it as far as we can and be pretty much sure that it is a third-party module problem before we would push the problem back on you and say, you have to go to someone else to deal with it. Jaspreet may want to add more to this. Jaspreet is in our support group, so.
Just want to add to it, like, why we don't support third-party modules is the exact question, right?
I'm talking more the larger issue of how do you keep the customer happy and how do you actually become part of the solution when it may not actually
be our problem. Right.
Okay. Just to add to it what Sean said, like, we do our best to make sure that it's not the third party at the first place. We take it on ourselves that it's, yes, there's an issue and it has something to do with the .NET. We'll try to go to the point where we can be 100% sure, no, it's some kind of third-party extension. Now, when you say a third-party extension, there are vendors behind that extension, and some vendors have great support. So it becomes difficult for, as a .NET New CARP, I would say, to take away that support from the vendors and do it on us. In addition to it, if you look at the ecosystem, there are thousands of extensions, and I have only 10 people in support. So it's very difficult for us to match that ecosystem at this point, and we are growing. And I cannot say what's hold in the future, but currently to support thousands of extensions in that scenario, it is very difficult. But yes, if you have a third-party vendor and you're saying you're not getting a good support from them, then obviously then comes in the store team and we get in touch with the vendor and make sure that the communication gap, if there is a communication gap between the customer and the vendor, we can fill that communication gap up and make sure the customer is getting all the support from the vendor that is needed. Okay?
And I would just highlight the last thing that Jaspreet said there, because I think that's really, really important, and it's something that we've stressed in the support organization since we first started offering the Pro product 3 years ago now. And that is that we always try to do everything we can to not push it onto somebody else. That even when we have situations where we know it's a third party that's got the problem, that we still step in and make sure that the customer is getting the support that they need. I've been involved in more than one conversation between customers and third parties where we were there bridging the gap and saying, hey, let's get all the people on one phone call and let's resolve this. I know in more than one case we've done that with partners, we've done that with customers. So, I know that we go well above and beyond what our minimum license requirements say that we're going to provide for support.
Right. Yeah, no, I think Chris Kendall, Director of Customer Care, is very particular that they don't ask a question on the version. We support more versions than what the license agreement even allows. And he's particular in telling his team that we have to go out of the way to solve the problem. The problem is for our customer. Our job is to make the customer happy. And that's the philosophy with which we will live by. Only in the instance where the third-party module is complex and by touching it we're going to hurt you more than help, might we not do anything. Otherwise, in every other instance, we will solve the problem. So this is the last two questions, okay.
Okay, I want to just go back to Peter's comment, more of a question for everybody in this room rather than you guys. I'll be the first to admit, I am one of those core module people that's in charge of a module that has admittedly slacked. So first of all, sorry. But second of all, if you're a developer, if you are wanting to get involved with one of those projects, the people that are in charge of them will gladly accept help. So if you do want to contribute, if you want to give to those Forge projects, get in touch with the person that's in charge of it and we'll gladly welcome the help. For me, it's literally a time thing. I haven't had time to get the release out. So if you want to get involved, get with the person that's in charge of it and we'll gladly take the help.
Thank you. The last question.
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for putting on such a wonderful event. We've all, I think, had a very great time. The Charlotte Users Group had a little bit of experience in putting on an event on a much smaller scale, and we understand everything that went into this one. I think we do. Secondly, part of our enjoyment in coming to the event is to unleash the QC Doug evangelist on an unsuspecting community. So we bring Clint Patterson to provide a lot of entertainment. So thanks, Clint.
He is entertaining.
And finally, on the topic of Nebula, I wondered as you were considering this, did you look at other companies in a similar situation who were taking a product or a platform and building a solution on that? Did you look at companies who were successful at that? And conversely, did you consider what pitfalls there may be in moving in that direction?
That's a great question. It's also a very loaded question. But it is a great question. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think our roots are in the platform. We all know that. That's where our strength comes from. And we cannot afford to lose those strengths even as we move to a solution. So when you're trying to move to a solution, there are, you call them pitfalls, I'll call them challenges, same thing, tomato, tomato, right? The challenges that we've identified internally are, there is a product challenge. And when I say product challenge, it's not just the product itself, there's a mindset challenge. Mindset challenge inside the organization, a cultural challenge inside the organization. Because when people have been doing platform for the longest time, whether it's engineers or anybody else, they think in a particular way. Getting them to think in a different way to build a solution, that's a challenge. And we have taken on the challenge. And we are making a lot of progress. And you will see that with the first release of Nebula, right? Then the second challenge is a little bit more difficult. The first one I say is difficult, but it's more easily solvable because it's in our control, right? Because it's in our control, I mean, it'll be emotionally difficult, but you can still make the shift if you're persistent enough. The second challenge is the market challenge, which is the perception of .NET Nuke is a platform. Now you have a new solution called Nebula sitting on .NET Nuke. So there, changing perception involves a messaging exercise, which I think somebody pointed out at the beginning, that we have sucked at, which I agree with. And I have no qualms about it. We have not been great at messaging, not ever. And we thought we would get better, we didn't. But we will change that. So there's a messaging problem, and then there's a problem of taking that message to the different market segments and making it resonate. So there are those two issues, right? So we've identified some of those things. And we have spoken to companies who have done this. We have spoken to companies who have struggled with it. We have spoken to companies who have been successful as well. So all I can tell you today is we are going into this with our eyes open. We're going into this knowing that we don't know certain things. We're also going into this knowing that that once we get in, there will be new things that we will discover that we will not have anticipated. We're also prepared for that. So in effect, what I'll summarize by saying that, like what I tell my team constantly is, we have to make this shift, and we will be relentless until we make the shift. Every time we make a mistake, we will learn from it, but we will not stop moving forward. So that's the best I can tell you. All right. So I got a few things to say before we close for the day and the conference. So first of all, I want to thank Trademark. They've been responsible for all the logistics, the organization, sending out the invites, the graphics, everything you see, the chairs. They've been responsible for organizing the whole conference. Specifically, Elle, John, Wendy, Jeff, Jen, they've all been working. You haven't seen them. The good thing is you haven't seen them because the conference is going smoothly, so they don't need to come up in your face, right? But some of them are in the back room there doing stuff. I think they've done a simply phenomenal job. I kind of was talking to Richard and Elle in the afternoon, and she had her second can of Red Bull with her, and I kind of figured, okay, it's been a hard day. So a round of applause to them, please. Yeah. Second, I want to thank our sponsors. Microsoft Azure. Microsoft has been a great supporter of .NET Nuke, starting many years ago when they first sponsored Sean to continue working on the open source project when he had the arrangement with Scott Guthrie. Starting from that point till date, they've been great supporters of us. Scott Hunter flew all the way for the keynote. They were our diamond sponsors, so I'm very thankful to them. I'm also thankful to the platinum sponsors we had this year: Marketo, we had Applied Eye, Power DNN, ITM, Data Springs, and we also had a bunch of sponsors on the gold and the silver level as well. It is very difficult to organize a conference like this without the support of sponsors. Sponsors are a key component of what makes this conference successful. So a round of applause to the sponsors, please. Yeah. Third, we're all safe in this country because we have something called the Department of Defense. You heard Les Benito's keynote yesterday. I thought it was excellent. They're a great customer of ours, but they're also very ardent supporters of ours. Their whole team flew in here. Les agreed to do a keynote here, so we're very thankful to them. I request a round of applause for them as well. And if none of you were sitting here, there would be no conference. So I want to thank all of you for having come to this conference, for giving us not just your dollars, because I know it takes money to travel, it takes money to come to the conference and all that, but more important than that, for giving us your time, for trusting us with your time. Because when you trust somebody with your time, you have to make sure that that time is well spent. And we have done our best to do that. But I do want to thank you for trusting us with your time for the last 2 days. Thank you. I want to thank a couple of other people. So I'll tell you a little bit about this before I go there. Last year we had the conference in November. This year we moved the conference back by a month. And a few months ago, we also had a false start with the conference website. There were a couple of days when I was pretty stressed out about the conference. So it was at that time that I called Richard Duma into my office, and he said, I want you to take on the conference. And he said, you mean now? I said, yes. And he said, you must be kidding. I said, no, I'm not. And his first response was actually no. And to be fair to him, it was a pretty onerous task to take it on at that time, because the time was shorter. We had started late, and we had already signed an agreement with Trademark, which they very kindly agreed to rework with us, because it just wouldn't have worked the way it was structured at the time. Richard took on a conference at a time when I wasn't even sure what was going to happen, to be honest. And I thought in a short period of time, he did a simply phenomenal job putting this whole thing together. Now, the interesting thing is he did as good a job last year as well. Last year, he was instrumental in a lot of the work that happened in the conference last year. I was very aware of it, but I don't think everybody was. But this year, I want to make sure that all of you are aware that he did a phenomenal job, not just last year, but this year under pretty trying circumstances as well. So thank you, Richard. He also had a very able lieutenant in Hilda, I think, was that right? Stephanie, is she here? She's taking out. She's still working. Then I want to close by telling you this last thing, well, last couple of things. I like talking, sorry. We put this conference together. A lot of us come here, and a lot of us show you our faces. It's kind of like we are the conference. And I hate to use this word, but you know what? It's bullshit, right? I did my keynote yesterday. And quite a few people came and said, well, the keynote is pretty good. I like your analogy of this. I like your analogy of that. You know what goes unrecognized is the people who actually helped me put that keynote together, right? It's the same thing for the conference. That keynote came out the way it did because of a graphic designer that we had in our office, Ryan. It came out the way it did because we have a graphic designer outside our office who worked with me as well. It came out the way it did because Will Morganwick had some interesting ideas. It came out the way it did because Chris Hammond did a video. It came out the way it did because Sean provided some feedback the night before I was supposed to talk because he felt I had too much sleep and could do with some sleepless nights. So my point being, a lot of effort goes into some of these things. It's the same thing for the conference. We come up and put a great show. It's great for me to sit here and talk. It's also great for some of these people, some of my colleagues to sit here, right? But the 2,000 customers that we have are being served by a support team that is still sitting in Langley. The product releases we had that we talked so proudly about, the 7.0 release that you all liked, hopefully. A lot of people said they liked. Nobody told me they didn't. Was done by an engineering team and a product team, a lot of whom are still sitting in Vancouver, in Australia, in Ireland. So they're still sitting there working, right?
Spain.
And Spain. We have a sales team, the accounting team still sitting in San Mateo. So my point being, all that work that goes in, because of that full team, we get to represent. We are privileged to represent that. So though they are not here, I do want to thank my team, the team at .NET New, who make this possible. Because without that kind of effort, there would be no substance in this conference. So as you leave today, I want to leave you with this. I said last year, I think in a vision statement, we will make web interactions insanely easy, insanely affordable, insanely productive for organizations worldwide. One word I want to go with is relentless. We will not stop until we get there. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice finish.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Good job, sir.